my stars, and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be reading Shows Who You Are, Chapter 3. Let the show begin. Here's the summary. The day of the presentations has arrived. 1A, please take a seat, buckle up, and get ready for the ride. 1 week after the announcement, 1A held their presentations about discrimination. Of the first 9 presentations, some were better than others, but all of them were fairly standard, informative, including necessary statistics and laced with personal experiences and opinions. And overall, Aizawa was fairly content with what his students made of their topics. But there was one presentation he was waiting for. The first pair was Yaoyorozu and Bakugo, who talked about gender inequality in general, but mostly regarding heroics. Like when those fuckers thought I shouldn't go hard on Roundface during the sports festival, just because she's a girl. So the fuck is wrong with these assholes? Language, Bakugo. Sero and Jiro talked about discrimination against people with a certain sexual orientation, a topic that Aizawa himself found rather important, seeing as he was married to President Mike. Sero and Jiro both disclosed their own sexual orientation, and the class took it without comment. Only Kaminari playfully mourned that Jiro was lost for men if she was into women. However, it was obvious that he didn't have a real problem with it, and it was all meant as a joke. Kaminari and Aoyama chose to talk about discrimination against certain ethnics. Their presentation slides were filled with sparkling emojis and glittering fireworks animations. But the talk itself was good. Aoyama's mother was French, and apparently the two teens had interviewed her to gather more information. The fourth talk was one of Uraraka and Todoroki. They presented the topic of discrimination based on wealth. Interestingly, they not only covered the discrimination against the poor, Uraraka blushed when she admitted how much trouble her family had to make ends meet, but also how the wealthy may suffer from prejudice, or from staying in the spotlight. Next was a very passionate presentation from Iida, who reminded the class that discrimination is not only actively harming people, but also neglecting their needs, and how hard it sometimes was for his brother to conduct simple tasks just because some places were easily reachable for people in a wheelchair. He was joined by a far quieter, but not any less passionate Koda, who revealed that he regularly visited homes for mentally disabled people and let them play with his pets. It was heartwarming when he showed them a picture of a little girl with his rabbit in her arms, a bright smile on her face. Ashido and Sato talked about religion. It wasn't the first choice for the two of them, but Sato's grandparents were apparently Christians, while Ashido had a cousin who was a member of the Vitkan cult. The presentation was more informative than personal, but it was a solid standard presentation. More personal was the presentation of Kirishima and Asui, who chose the topic of discrimination against weak quirks. The class, and Aizawa, was moved by the redhead's description of his feelings when he still thought his quirk was too weak to be a hero, and how lonely he was, since his classmates always outcasted him. Asui added her own experiences with being called weak and how others laughed about her wish to become a hero. Shoji and Ojiro found a very fitting topic, discrimination against mutation quirks. Especially the other students with obvious mutation quirks like Tokoyami, Ashido, Azui, and Koda could relate when the two boys talked about how they were called monsters and freaks, and how children on the streets pointed at them. Finally, the last presentation before the grand finale was the one of Tokoyami and Hagakure, who presented this discrimination against villainous quirks. Aizawa was very pleased when they started with the statement that the term villainous quirk was downright stupid, since no quirk was villainous per se, and when they talked about their personal experiences, even Dark Shadow was allowed to say a few things from his perspective. The black-haired teacher saw many people in the class gulp, certainly relieved that they had it better. If only they knew what was still to come. After Tokoyami and Hagakure returned to their seats, Aizawa stepped in front of the podium and announced a little break. There's one presentation left, and we'll have a few more teachers here for that. Before you ask, Iida, you will see why that is a good idea. In the meantime, just take a breather. We've already heard some heavy stuff. Be all back in your seats in 5 minutes. With that, he turned around and left the room, leaving the door open behind him. Kaminari followed after him, as well as Midoriya and Shinsou, after they set up their laptop. The rest of the class began to chatter quietly. None of them noticed the camera hanging from the ceiling, right over Kaminari's desk. Outside of the classroom, there were already a few teachers waiting. Hound Dog, Present Mike, All Might, and for some reason, even Nezu. Although he wasn't invited. Ah, Aizawa! The mammal greeted him with a smile. How are the presentations until now? They were a little better than expected, honestly, but some of them can compare to what is to come. Indeed. Then could someone tell me what exactly is to come? All Might asked. The gaunt man looked pretty confused. I'm only here because young Midoriya said he wanted me to see his presentation, and since you agreed, Aizawa. You'll see. The younger man answered unhelpfully, leaned against the wall, and closed his eyes. Still, he could practically feel Hizashi's fondly smiling at him. Well, let's go inside then. The principal decided and led the other three heroes into the room to take the seat on the four chairs that were reread for them before the lesson started. Aizawa stayed outside in the hallway, waiting for his moment to enter. He had to suppress a wide grin and hid the lower half of his face in his capture weapon. This would be interesting. Are you ready? He stood behind Izuku in front of the 1A classroom door, waiting for the 5-minute break to end. As ready as I can be, I guess. Sounds convincing. Izuku laughed a little breathlessly. Then he shook his head. I'm nervous since I don't know how they'll react. What if they have a problem with me afterwards? They're assholes who don't deserve you in the first place. The greenette shook his head, then turned to his other classmate. Kaminari, you know your part, right? Jeep, sure thing. The blonde gave them a thumbs up and a grin. Perfect. You ready too, Shinsou? You know what? Just call me Hitoshi. Really? The violet teen sighed. Really? Now stop stalling and get going. Then you can call me Izuku. The greenette answered with determination in his eyes. Let's do this. He pulled the remote control out of his pocket and turned on the projector in front of the classroom, and the camera over Kaminari's desk. The surface of the desk was broadcasted and visible for everyone in the room. There were a few confused murmurs from inside the room, the loudest being Tenya, asking if they could really begin if Aizawa wasn't there. But they calmed down quickly after Yamada sensei gestured for them to be quiet. Izuku plastered a nasty grin on his face and entered the room, followed by Hitoshi. He walked over to Kaminari's desk and shoved the purple teen lightly with his shoulder. Look what we have here, he said, and Hitoshi answered with a grin full of malice. Such a boring desk. Let's decorate it a little. They both pulled out some markers and started to write and draw things on the surface. Freak, null, under-evolved, go die, somewhere. Hitoshi drew a penis and pointed an arrow to it, labeling it with you. Finally, Izuku pulled a flower, its stem wrapped up in a plastic bag full of water. Out of the bag, he had slung over his shoulder and left it on the desk. It was a red spider lily. They made sure to stay upright enough the camera could show their artwork to their classmates. The silence in the room was tense as the two boys laughed about their decoration and made their way to their own desks. In that moment, Kaminari entered the room and made his way over to his desk. When he saw it, he stood there, frozen for a moment, his shoulders slumped and his gaze downcast. Finally, he pulled his chair out from under his desk, but before he could sit down, he was interrupted by Aizawa, who followed after him. Kaminari, next time I see your desk like that, you'll get a detention for a week. Now clean that mess up before I tell the principal that you damaged school property. The blonde student opened his mouth as in protest, but before he could bring a word out, his shoulders slumped again and he answered quietly, "Yes, sensei." Then he sat down without looking at anyone, and Aizawa walked over to the wall, where he slumped down in his sleeping bag. In the meantime, Izuku and Hitoshi made their way back to the front of the room and stood to either side of the projected video. With another hit on the button on the remote, Izuku switched from the video of their presentation slides, showing the title of their presentation, Quirkless Discrimination. We already heard a lot about discrimination today. Hitoshi began, but no other group in our society has it as bad as the quirkless. They face discrimination around every corner. Some of you might think, well, they're a dying breed, so what? But that's not true. They showed a slide with statistics on the world population, and Izuku continued, as you can see, still 20% of the world population is quirkless. This means every fifth person doesn't have a quirk. In Japan, however, it's a little different. Here, only about 4.6 of all people are quirkless, and most of them are over 50 years old. In the younger generations, in our generation, there are barely any quirkless people left. Most of you have very likely never really met a quirkless person. The green-haired boy's voice was a little monotone, as if he's just reciting facts he learned by heart. He still sounded compassionate, but not like it was a topic that was personal in any kind of way. And how should it? He had one of the most powerful quirks at the school. How could he ever encounter discrimination other than from the sidelines? What would he even know about anything? Only a week ago, Only a week ago, that was exactly what Hitoshi was thinking, and he could see in the face of their audience that they thought the same. Their looks were directed more at him than at Izuku, most likely because they thought he was the one who could relate most. Well, they would learn how wrong they were shortly. But now it was his turn again. What you just saw, the slurs on the table and the teacher who clearly knew that the person's desk belonged to wasn't the one to write them, was a fairly standard start of a school day for a quirkless person. And that's what we want to show you today, a day in the life of a quirkless teen. There were a few gasps in the class, and interestingly enough, from All Might. He continued, some of the things we're going to tell you, you may think we exaggerated. Surely it can't be that bad, but I assure you, it is. Every little detail we're going to mention comes from personal experience. Immediately, Hitoshi could see the pity in their eyes when they looked at him. Clearly, they all believed he was the one who had a life like that he could relate most to the quirkless since he himself had a villain's quirk. They all thought like he did, not too long ago. Izuku had a strong quirk, so how could he ever know anything about being powerless and pushed down by society? Oh, if they just knew how wrong they were. Another push on a button showed the next slide, which was actually a video. A video of President Mike slamming an English exam on a table with a disgusted look on his face. There were almost no false answers on the first page, still a big fat zero adorned the upper left corner. You tried to cheat again, didn't you? Yamada sensei in the video sneered. There's no way someone under-evolved like you could pass with such a grade. You're stupid by nature, and we both know it. So stop cheating. There's 0 points and 2 hours of detention for you. Next time, I'll put a mark on your record. The video ended, and Hitoshi spoke up. Being graded unfairly, and even failed by teachers for no reason, is to be expected when you are quirkless. In fact, it's far more likely than having a decent teacher who would look out for you. Normally, teachers not only ignore the bullying done to you, but they even contribute to it. Izuku continued, in an anonymous survey about 3 years ago, more than 60% of all quirkless students in junior high or high school admitted to being greeted unfairly or otherwise harassed by their teachers. However, the real number is most likely much higher. Another slide showed another video. It was made from the perspective of a person who wore a body cam, but this person wasn't recognizable. Very much recognizable, on the other hand, was the blonde third-year student Mirio that pressed the corkless person up against the wall, smirking down at him cruelly. What do you think you're doing? Just walking around and wasting air that's meant for people who deserve it? Really? I've never seen such a waste of space. Behind him, his two friends laughed at his oh so funny words. Then, Mirio took a swing, and his fist rushed straight for the camera, which clearly would have been a hard blow for the corkless person's upper body. A cut showed the person with the camera running the halls of UA until they reached a restroom, where they saw a bento box on the ground. Clearly, this person eating lunch in the restroom. This discrimination quirkless teenagers face from their teachers is tame. However, compared to what other students do, Hitoshi explained, wherever you go, there is always someone seeing a chance to use you as an outlet for their aggression or bad mood. It starts with the name calling in middle school, then it gets physical. It's just shoving at the beginning, but then there are sudden fists in your stomach and scratches on your back. Maybe there is even a stare so conventionally before you when you're pushed from behind. You learn to walk silently, to hide, to run. You learn to read expressions and to know which body parts you should protect. And finally, they use their quirks on you, and at first, you're happy. By being their target, you'll get to help them, right? You'll get to help them gain better control over their quirk, like a friend would. Not that you would know what having friends is like, but you imagine it. It could be like this, if it just wouldn't hurt that much. The purple-eyed teen saw tears in a few of his more emotional classmates' eyes as Izuku took over. 74% of all quirkless children under 12 say that they've been bullied by their classmates at least 3 days a week. 89 of all quirkless teens up until they're 18 reported extensive bullying in school every day. More than two-thirds of them received injuries that left scars on them. He switched to the next slide, which showed a clock slowly ticking away, judging from the time it displayed. It was symbolizing the passing of the afternoon. It was Hitoshi's turn again. In the afternoon, you hear how others talk about what they're going to do after school, about how they wanted to play the new video game their dad bought them, or how their mother promised to make their favorite food for dinner. And you think about your own family, how your father left the second he heard about your diagnosis as quirkless, how you cook your own dinners most days of the week because your single mother has to work late to earn enough money to pay the apartment. The rent went up higher the moment your landlord heard about your quirklessness, so it's your fault and you don't complain. You know your mom loves you. She tells you she does. And whenever she's home, she cooks for you and listens to everything you have to say. She's the only one who's always kind to you. She's your everything, so you hide your injuries because you don't want to see her cry. Hitoshi took a deep breath when he finishes and cast a glare at Bakugo, who sat ramrod straight in his chair. There was no mistaking anymore what quirkless person they talked about. Not for the ash blonde teen, at least. Then his glance strays away, swiping over the rest of the class. He noticed that most of the girls now had a few tears rolling down their cheeks. This scenario is one of the best ones you'll find in regards of quirkless people's home lives. Almost every sixth quirkless child is abandoned by their parents in their first year after their diagnosis. Of the remaining children, a third is abandoned at an older age, but still before their 16th birthday. Of the quirkless children that stay at home until old enough to stay on their own 2 feet, 58% are subjected to physical or psychological abuse by their own parents. 71% admit to being neglected or treated like they were too fragile and too dumb to do anything by themselves. A few shocked gasps were heard in the room, and Todoroki looked almost as if he wanted to vomit. A new slide showed the picture of the 1C classroom. Yamada sensei slumped in his seat. "Sit down and shut your mouth," he commanded, and the person wearing the body cam did as he was told. It was clear that this video showed the detention he got, but he, instead of working or even just sitting in his chair, Yamada in the video got up and walked over to the desk the quirkless person sat at. Hitoshi glanced at the real Yamada, who was pretty pale at the moment and fiddled with his hands uncomfortably. The teen knew exactly why the man reacted like this. This was one of the hardest parts of the whole presentation. In the video, Yamada had reached the students' desks and sat on the chair in front of him, backwards with his arms crossed over the chair back. And then he started speaking, a dark glint in his eyes. Mike Sensei really was a great actor. You should stop getting yourself in trouble like that. If you keep this up, I'll soon have no chance than putting a mark on your record. Except, he slowly reached out, apparently touching the person somewhere above the body cam. I could let it slide a little more, even though I'm not supposed to. But that could get me in trouble, so I'm sure even you understand that I can't do this for nothing. I need to. I need you to make it up to me. He grinned like the pervert he pretended to be. Just be a little nice to me and we can forget the cheating, alright? Except you want to have a black mark on your record. That would ban you from going to any hero school, wouldn't it? Would be hard to get into UA like that. It's up to you, sweetheart. Hitoshi swallowed and tried to wet his dry lips with the tip of his tongue. There's one teacher you fear more than any other. He's not one of the truly cruel ones. Not one of the ones that cane you or muzzle you because you're too disruptive otherwise. No, he can never hit you, but he loves giving you detention. He loves just how much he has you in his hand, and Hitoshi had to swallow down a bit of bile trying to creep up his gullet, and he loves it when you have him in your hand. But he never goes further. He's careful not to leave any traces behind. The whole class grasped, and most of them pressed their hands to their mouths, probably trying not to throw up. And Hitoshi understood. He wished he didn't have to say what he had just said, but they wanted to show them the truth. This was one of the big reasons why they wanted to have the school counselor with them. The class would need it afterwards, but for now, Izuku had some statistics to relay. It wasn't any more pretty, than what Hitoshi had said, but at least it was clinical and emotionless. 13% of all quirkless children under the age of 18 admitted that they have been sexually harassed and abused by one of their teachers. In the last 5 years, there were 14 reports of sexual abuse by teachers filed by quirkless children in Musutafu. In the statistics of all the police, all of them were listed under false accusations, and none of them were investigated further. Genuinely, only about 8% of all reported crimes against quirkless people are taken seriously and investigated. In most cases, they get completely ignored by the police force. The next video started to play at the press of a button. It was one they made on Saturday. The unknown quirkless person runs through the streets. There are footsteps behind them, taunting voices. He slams into a wall when he rounds a corner as fast as possible, and then there's the sound of metal rattling from behind, mixing with his own hard breaths. A deep voice laughs cruelly. It's clear that this is a hunt, and Hitoshi speaks again. One of the most important things you learn when you are quirkless is that you are never safe. There's not just the teachers and bullies at school. No, it goes way further than that. Wherever you go, whatever you're doing, you'll always expect someone to attack you. Sometimes you don't even know how they know about your quirk status, but it doesn't matter. You learn to run, not only fast, but far. You learn how to hide in shadows behind dumpsters, praying not to be discovered because if they find you, then being beat up and left bloodied on the ground is the best case scenario. Corkless individuals are 4 times more likely to be attacked than corked people. Izuku explains, his green eyes glassed over as if he read a script in his mind. Often, these attacks result in the death of the victim. Actually, 31% of all corkless deaths under the age of 20 are caused by hate crimes. Many of them could have been saved if the police and medical personnel helped them like they would have helped a corked individual. However, hospital staff and police officers tend to find that there's always a corked person that needs their attention more. He took a breath. There are several illegal platforms in the darknet that display names, pictures, and addresses, and every other information that they got their hands on of corkless people, just to make them easier to target. Usually, these platforms are hosted by anti-corkless groups. Although we know that some of them have been reported repeatedly, and the police have still never taken them down. The green-haired boy took a deep breath. The slight hitch in it only noticeable to Hitoshi, since he stood right next to him. However, hate crimes are not the most common reason for the death of corkless people. He continued, 42% of all corkless born in the last 25 years died because they reached their 16th birthday. 63 died before the age of 20. And more than half of their deaths are caused by suicide. 3 out of 5 corkless children in school admitted to have been suicide baited regularly. 9 out of 10 had experienced it at least once. The corkless population is faced with far higher chances of ending up homeless or unemployed, and UAs is one of the 11 high schools in all of Japan who allow corkless people to apply. And all in all, they don't really have much perspective for their future. They switched to the last video, the one that was cut the most. Firstly, they saw a stairwell. The filming person climbed up the stairs. Then you could see a door that was opened and the person stepped out onto a rooftop. Slowly, they walked to the railing and the camera turned down to show how high they were. The single person walking down on the street looked small like a toy. Falling from this height meant immediate death. Hitoshi heard a small noise, almost a whimper, from the teacher at the wall, and he glanced over to see All Might, pale as a ghost, and with tears in his eyes, his hands clawed at his 2 bony knees. The camera panned back up and showed the beautiful sunset, and Hitoshi spoke the soft words Izuku had muttered on the rooftop, enlightened in the orange hues of the sunset and staring into the dark memories. When you're corkless, you mean nothing. You're less than dirt under everybody's feet. And one day you start to think, what if maybe it's because you see your mom crying over the bills she doesn't know how to pay. Maybe it's because the beating you got that day just hurt the tiny bit more. Maybe it's because someone told you that the world would be better without you. Maybe it was the red spider lilies left on your desk that day, and you start to think, what if it really would be better for you to just be gone? Wouldn't it be easier for everyone if you stopped being a burden on everyone, stopped wasting air and space and other resources for other people deserved more than you, if you stopped wishing for a better life, if you stopped dreaming? The video continued. They saw the sunset, but now there were voices. Stop being a burden, Ida's voice said, and the blue-haired teen stiffened. You'll never amount to anything, Kirishima's voice continued, making the redhead shake in his seat. We'd be better off without you. Hagakare's voice echoed through the otherwise silent room. One after the other, the voices of every class member joined the chorus of slurs and suicide baiting, faster and faster, louder and louder, until they all mixed together in a cacophony that filled the room and made some of the teenager clasp their hands over their ears, trying to shut it out. And the picture changed. To the railing vanished out of the picture as the person climbed over it. Pale, bare feet could be seen when the person looked down. And then the feet took a step forward, and the camera tipped over as the person fell, and the projection got black. Everything was silent beside the labored breathing of the students and some of the teachers. Most of their classmates had tears streaming down their cheeks at this point, and even All Might and Present Mike had to press a hand to their mouths to muffle their sobs. And Izuku looked like he wasn't completely there. For once, he wasn't crying, wasn't moving, he wasn't doing anything. If he wasn't visibly breathing, Hitoshi would have thought he was just a statue, but he wasn't. He was a living, breathing, feeling human being in this presentation must hurt so much. So unbearably much. But he could stand to live a quirkless life for 11 years. If there was one thing he was familiar with, it was pain. And he could gain so much too. He could gain his peace of mind, gain the knowledge that here were people, future heroes that would care for somebody like him, that would help make a better world, and nothing could stop Izuku Midoriya from trying to make the world better. So they carried on. For the first time in the presentation, the two boys broke the rhythm they established with Hitoshi saying something personal and Izuku following with the facts. This time, it was the purple-haired teen who started with the information part. In corcosness, Hitoshi began, is diagnosed at the age of 4 or 5. Most common method is to make an x-ray of the child's foot, since the Quirkus people possess a few body parts that Quirked people lack. One of them is an extra toe joint in their pinky toe. Others are wisdom teeth or an appendix. Having these bodily marks is enough to destroy one's life. But he paused for the dramatic effect and not to swallow his own tears and get his voice back under control. Absolutely not. This diagnosis method is not foolproof. There is something called false negatives. False negatives, Izuku took over, are people whose bodies show all the signs of quirklessness, but who still have a quirk. Usually these quirks come in very late, but once they're first activated, they are very strong. Strong enough to break someone's bones, and it happens suddenly. You can go into the physical part of your high school exam without a quirk and leave with a quirk that could demolish a giant robot in a single punch, shattering both your legs and one arm in the process. The green-haired teen took another deep breath, then he said, "Hi everyone, I'm Izuku Midoriya, and I'm a false negative. I was quirkless up until the UA entrance exam. All the things you just saw, they all happened to me. And that one day on the rooftop, I was so close to leave this cruel world and this painful life behind, so close to never get to know any of you. All my life I've been waiting for a hero to come and save me from my misery. But everyone just looked the other way. Nobody came to my rescue. I was never with it to be helped, and it nearly broke me. So, and finally, the tears streamed down his face freely, silently. So, I hope that one day, you and me, we can all be heroes who will help everybody, who will give hope to the quirkless people that that our suffering will matter to someone, that we are worth something to someone, that we are still human, that these are heroes, that there are heroes out there who try to make the world a better place for us too. Thank you for your attention. Hitoshi closed their presentation, and there was no applause like there was after all the other presentations. They were all just silent tears on pale faces, and shaking hands and wide, horrified eyes, and a boy waiting for a verdict. All right, my stars. That is the end of that chapter. That chapter always it's such a strong chapter. It has so many triggers for many people, but it's so well written that it seems like these were actual personal experiences. Which I'm not saying that they weren't, that the writer might have had, I don't know, inside sources, but it's always a hard chapter, and I really, as you can see in most of these parts, I did mess up with my talking. I don't have my glasses right now, so the words did get muddled up. and I wasn't able to fully like realize until it was too late, and now I am really not bothered going back to change them. So but I really hope you enjoyed that. Near the end, I was trying when Izuku was starting to like gain his tears and everything. I was trying to make my voice shaky so that it would seem like he's really struggling with it now. And then in some parts, I did try to emphasize some of the words. But yeah. And again, I am so sorry for being gone for so long. CapCut decided to update its terms of services, and I only found this out from a TikTok explaining how it's problematic now. And as you could see on my community posts, I kind of explained just a little bit of it. And I'm trying out a new recording app. I'm trying Audacity, so that's why my recordings might sound a little different now. Because they're not recorded on a small little phone with no microphone. They're recorded on my laptop with an actual microphone this time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this part, and I'm just gonna go and record the final part after this, and I'm gonna schedule it to be posted soon. And then after this, I only have one more fic to record, before I run out of fics. So I'm gonna try to find some more to record and have scheduled, because I am going on holiday in a few weeks, so I will not be able to record. But I will try to find some fics to record now and have them scheduled. And I promise this time I won't fail with them. But anyway, my stars, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any other recommendations you'd like me to read, you can always put them down in the comments below. The fic to the link is also in the description below, so please go down there and show some kudos to the author, because they did a great job. And I always love to hear what you say about this, what you think about the fics. So you can also drop that down in the comments, and my Discord and socials are also in the description below, so please go check them out, because we will be doing maybe some events soon. But yeah, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and bye, my stars.